Good morning, good evening. My name is Jaime Saavedra. I'm the Global Director for Education at the World Bank. I want to thank GDN for the invitation. I'm honored to participate in this session with such distinguished colleagues. I'm really sorry that I cannot be live in this event, but I would like to share a few remarks trying to address some of the points that Shanta has put on the table. So is the use of evidence in policymaking on the rise or not? I would say that there are two ways of seeing this. One is that no, countries are not investing enough or putting the institutional conditions to make sure that decisions are based on evidence. There's been some progress in some countries, but not nearly enough. I can mention a good experience during my tenure as Minister of Education in Peru, where we set up a unit whose objective was to support policy design through pilots and establish evaluation processes partnering with universities and private think tanks. That was a move in the right direction, but it's not warranted that the initiative will be maintained a long time. Another option is that now it looks good to say that we are basing policy decisions on evidence. But then, as Shanta has pointed out, governments can take the shortcut and just choose whatever evidence is out there, even if low quality evidence not even grounded on facts, that supports their intended positions, and disregard all the rest. Unfortunately, we see too much of that, and that's probably even worse. So let me be somewhat pessimistic. Development clearly is not linear. There has been some progress, but in the last few years, my sense is that not only we have not invested enough in strengthening the link between the generation of evidence and the use of that evidence for policymaking, but that actually there has been some backward steps. The pandemic gives us a few examples. On one hand, it has been an incredible triumph of science, finding a vaccine, an effective vaccine in record time. But at the same time, as many decisions about combating the pandemic have been led by ideology or political pragmatism. The school opening process has been one example. School closures were seen as part of the arsenal to combat the pandemic since the early stages, without really knowing if its effectiveness in terms of reducing the spread of the virus. As time passed, evidence mounted that schools actually were safer than restaurants, bars, or shopping malls. And I'm not saying that opening schools is easy. It's an extremely complex logistical endeavor and pedagogical endeavor, but it was possible much earlier than what happened in many countries. But the evidence was disregarded. We really need to combat this trend, being a relentless advocate of the need to provide solutions that are based on scientific evidence. This requires actually convincing people who are not the researchers or producers of evaluations, but are the consumers of information and data. We need to continue working in creating a whole ecosystem of educated consumers of scientific evidence, not only in government, but in civil society and in the press at least. But to be effective, in order to make evidence used, it has to be more friendly, more relevant, and more practical. That might not sound like the homework of researchers, but the alternative is that their audience will be limited to other researchers to see how good and publishable their work is. First, something very easy. Please don't put results only as standard deviations. With that, you lose 99% of the audience that you want to convince about something. Second, we need to prioritize evaluating programs that might be scaled up in a cost-effective way. There are so many evaluations that say, yes, this works, but might be too expensive to scale up. Then actually the value of that finding for policymakers is extremely low or could be zero. I want to here raise your attention to the Global Education Evidence Advisory Panel that we put together between the World Bank and FCDO, in which a group of researchers and practitioners of different disciplines assess the available evidence of not only what works in education, but what works in a cost-effective way. And third, we need to evaluate and assess the policy implementation process. Many evaluations recognize that the design was good, but that probably the lack of impact was because the implementation was not correct. But we leave that for another paper. But usually that other paper never sees the light because evaluating how things are implemented is not sexy enough and is not publishable enough. However, it is precisely in that implementation process where many policies usually fail. So process evaluations are critical, and so are the opinions of stakeholders and beneficiaries in education, which will be the opinions of students and teachers and parents. Bottom line, there's a huge task ahead of us, both to produce more evidence, but more important, to making sure that we work on the use of evidence, and that we work not only with policymakers, but with the media, with civil society, with opinion makers, and with the public in general to be educated users of evidence. And I'm very happy that GDN can continue playing a critical role in this development challenge. Thank you very much.